This is terrifying for me to share, and I'm still not sure if I should be. But I have no idea what else to do. I'm shaking as I type this, so I'm really sorry if it doesn't make sense. I'll try to start from the beginning. For as long as I can remember, there is an episode of Full House that has been burned into my memory. The only thing is that it doesn't exist, or I shouldn't remember it existing. I must have been 6 or so when I remember watching this episode, but to this day, I haven't found evidence of its existence. I don't remember the whole episode itself, but I do remember its biggest plot line. Kimmy thought she was pregnant. It was in the later season of Full House when DJ and Kimmy were teenagers, and I remember a very specific moment in the episode when Kimmy was in DJ's room and they were waiting on the results of the test. It ended up being negative and the girls celebrated and threw it in DJ's trash. Of course, later in the episode, Danny changes DJ's trash and finds the test. He thinks it's hers and freaks out. Then it comes out that it's Kimmy's, and Danny and DJ have a talk about consent and waiting to have sex, and Danny urges Kimmy to tell her parents. It was all really heavy and mature for an episode of Full House, but I thought nothing of it at the time. Since I didn't really get what sex was at the time, I brushed off the episode as another adult matter I just didn't understand. I didn't really think there was anything wrong with it until years later when I was a teenager watching the reruns of Full House. I saw every episode a few times over the course of a year, but never saw that episode. I then looked the show up on IMDb and didn't find that episode. I again dropped it, until last year when the whole Shazam Kazam thing happened and the Mandela effect was brought up. I remembered that episode of Full House again, and I did a frantic search for it on the internet, but I found no evidence of it. Nothing. Not even information on an episode pulled from air. I even posted on the Mandela subreddit, but people didn't seem to know what I was talking about and suggested I was thinking of another show or movie, or even dreamt up the whole thing. But they're wrong. I can remember it clearly. Not a dream, but me sitting in front of the television and watching this episode. So even if this episode only aired once, how did nobody else seem to know about it? A couple weeks ago, I was out with my sister at our favorite bar. We were talking about how anxious we were for the next season of Fuller House. What can I say? We love the cheesiness. When I thought to mention the episode to her, for some reason, I never brought it up with my own sister, even though we watched the show together a lot. She teased me a lot growing up and still teases me, so I think I was just scared of her calling me stupid or making fun of me. I tried starting out inconspicuously and said, "Do you remember an episode of Full House where Kimmy takes a pregnancy test?" To my shock, she said, "Yeah, I remember it. I actually don't remember the last time I've seen it, but I think I remember her taking the test and she's not pregnant. But of course, it gets all dramatic because Danny finds the test and thinks it's DJ's." I stared at her and was like, "Dude, that episode doesn't exist. I remember the exact same thing, but I swear to you, this episode doesn't exist." She basically told me I was stupid and that obviously it existed because we both remembered it. And believe me, my sister has no idea what Reddit even is, so there's no way she found my post about it and then was pulling some prank on me. And besides, pranks aren't her sense of humor. We kinda let the subject drop, and again, I thought that was the last of the weirdness surrounding this whole issue. I mean, yes, it was weird, even a little creepy, but not scary. I can't tell you how much I wish that was the last time I thought about it. I logged into Reddit the other day and checking my messages and stuff. Well, there was a new response on my Full House post. It was some user, and all their reply said was, "I remember, but I shouldn't, and neither should you. Delete this post now." Now this creeped me out a little. I decided I didn't want any stupid comments on it anymore, so I went back to my profile to delete the post. Except when I clicked back to my profile, the post was nowhere to be found. And I'm not talking like the post was removed or anything like that. There was just no evidence whatsoever that the post had ever existed. Now I was convinced there was something going on. I turned on the TV to calm my nerves and texted my sister telling her what happened. I got her response probably an hour later. It just made things worse. My sister acted all confused and asked what I was talking about. I recounted the whole Full House episode thing we talked about, but she assured me that she had no recollection of us having a conversation about it, and certainly didn't remember any Full House episode like that. Again, pranks aren't my sister's thing. This wasn't her style, and the whole thing was getting way under my skin. How could my sister remember it 2 weeks ago and not now? That whole Reddit thing and the conversation with her was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I got a message from a user on Reddit, which I'm pretty sure is the same person who commented originally on my other post. I copied and pasted it into a Word doc right away because I was afraid it would get deleted. You posted something about a Full House episode you remember that doesn't exist. I saw it too. It looks like you deleted the post. Good job. I'm going to delete my profile after I send this, so don't try to respond. My best advice to you is to stop talking about this episode now. I shouldn't remember it, but I do. This isn't about Full House or any TV show. It's something so much bigger, and you need to be careful. I'm risking my own butt to message you, so please take my advice. My best friend and I both remembered the episode. We remember watching it together with my brother babysitting us, the whole shebang. We actually talked about the episode a lot because she had a pregnancy scare in high school, and we jokingly compared it to that episode and were like, oh, don't throw it in the trash where parents could see it. And when Fuller House came out, we binged watched the old series together before the new one. And that's when we realized the other episode never existed. We searched everywhere on the internet for it like you said you did, but couldn't find any info. We figured it was something that only aired once or something and forgot about it. Fast forward to a few months ago. I bring up the whole Full House thing again for some reason, and she doesn't remember. I mean, we had just talked about it, we had stories behind it, but my best friend swears up and down that she has no idea what I'm talking about. I work in production stuff now, so I figured that I could somehow work my way up to somebody on the old Full House staff through my connections, since I wanted to figure this all out. So I talked to some of my friends and got way up to one of the original producers for Full House, and got the guy on the phone. I tell him the whole story, and this guy freaks the fuck out. I mean, he basically is like, how do you know this? You shouldn't know this. Shut your mouth. All this stuff. And then the guy is like, I'm going to tell you so you know to stop asking questions. And apparently the whole thing is some kind of test that the producers were forced into by somebody won't say who. They were supposed to create and air an out-of-place episode once and then never air it again. Then he goes on to say that the entire Full House cast and staff were ordered to watch the episode as it aired all in one big theater. These were all orders from the same people who made them do it. Except the producer turned off his hearing aids while watching it and looked at the floor instead of the screen. And since then, he's the only one from the whole Full House team who remembers filming this episode. He sounded pretty scared and made me swear to keep it all a secret. I honestly think he only told me because he was glad there was someone else out there who remembered. I'm really sorry it took so long for me to get this story out, but I just wanted you to hear my story and take it seriously. Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. For some reason, I'm scared that something is going to happen to me, and maybe you too. The message was weird, and as the user promised, their profile was deleted when I tried to click on it. As suspected, the message itself disappeared from my inbox shortly after I copied it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, so today I tried searching lightning prods in Google. On the second or third page, I found an email address on a website where some woman had it on her resume. Her resume looked like a bunch of video production stuff, so I figured this was the same person that had messaged me. Wanting more answers, I Googled her name. The results lit up with a bunch of news stories. Apparently, the woman had been abducted the night before from a Sunoco. The gas station employee said he watched men dressed in all black throw her into a black van and speed off. That was all last night, only hours after I got that message from the Lightning Prods user. Honestly, this is my last attempt at asking somebody for help. I know it's risky to share all of this with the internet and possibly give away my identify, but it seems like they already got into my sister's brain, so they have to know who I am. I have no idea who the they is, but it's clear that this Full House episode was some kind of test that I either passed or failed. I'm not supposed to remember it, and I realize that now. I keep trying to forget it, but I can't. It's seared into my memory, and if I haven't forgotten it by now, I probably won't. Does that mean they're coming for me? Who is they? I am terrified. I don't know how long this post will even stay up here. But please, if you remember this episode, keep it where it belongs, in your head. My family and I have been going through a very strange experience over the last couple of months. It's hard to even put into words or explain what is going on. I guess I can just start off from where it all started to feel off. A few months back, my family had a big get-together. My parents both have 2 siblings, They all got married and had some kids. Well, all of them except Uncle Matt. He never got married or had kids. That means I have 10 cousins. My aunts and uncles all live within 2 hours of us, so we've all grown up together. That being said, we don't normally have all my aunts and uncles in a house at once. This was a rare occasion to have a family meal when they were all free. I will not be naming every single family member in this post because that seems like a lot of information. And honestly, you've already gotten more information about my family than you ever wanted, but I promise this context is important. Okay, enough with my babbling. Let's talk about what happened that weird night. My parents and I went over to my Aunt Margot and Uncle Ken's house for a barbecue in the backyard. The backyard felt loud and chaotic. I tried to stay out of the way and get the night over with. I was honestly just there for the free food. We were all sitting down at a big table outside. I was so focused on making sure none of the napkins went flying in the wind, I wasn't listening to the conversation. My Aunt Margot came over to the table with a plate of really burnt hot dogs. My mom immediately started to laugh at the sight of them. Is burning food genetic or something? How on earth do you guys always do that to food? The Jensens need to leave the cooking to the Millers. My mom said with a sarcastic giggle. Uncle Ken looked at her confused. What are you on about, Liz? Uncle Ken snapped back. I mean, Margot burnt the hot dogs and Matt always burns food when he cooks. Remember, we had to ban him for months from cooking because we had to order takeout like 3 times in a row. Everyone at the table laughed, recalling their memories. Sighs of recollection bounced back and forth from person to person when my dad spoke up in Aunt Margot's defense. Honey, what are you talking about? Matt is your brother. I really shouldn't have to remind you of that. My mom rolled her eyes in response to my dad. I spoke up because I was suddenly confused about which side of the family Uncle Matt was actually on. You would think I would naturally just know that, but all my aunts and uncles act like siblings and call each other their siblings. My grandparents often refer to their son-daughter-in-laws as just their kids, so it isn't something I always think about. Wait, I'm confused. Whose side is Uncle Matt on? What is the joke? I don't get it. I asked, but was only met with a laugh from all the parents at the table. I finally got an answer from my mom following the silence of the joke that somehow went over my head. Don't be silly, baby. Matt is your dad's brother. As the words left her mouth, half the table looked confused. Liz, what are you talking about? He is on your side. He is a Miller. My Aunt Margot said as she scraped off the burnt edges of her hot dog. Okay. Now I'm with Amanda. I don't get the joke. My mom said while looking at me with narrow, inquisitive eyes, and then at the rest of the group. Wait, everyone slow down. Aunt June said, speaking up for probably the first time in the night. This is dumb. Matt is not Liz and I's brother. He has to be on the Jensen side of the family. I sat at the table watching my family in silence. Their eyes darted back and forth. They stopped laughing and were all just scratching their heads. After a few minutes, my mom got out her phone. She found an old family photo from when she was a kid. In the photo were her, my grandparents, my Uncle Paul, and my Aunt June. Nothing out of the ordinary. After looking at the picture, Aunt Margot got out her phone and looked for an old childhood photo. Aha! Found one, she stated as she showed off the photo on her phone. Yet again, the photo was normal. It had my grandparents, my dad, Aunt Margot, and Aunt Susan. The next hour consisted of both sides of the family going back and forth showing photos. None of them with Uncle Matt in them. I had a few of my cousins there, but they all lost interest once they ate. I, on the other hand, couldn't be pulled away. I was engrossed in learning where the heck Uncle Matt came from. They kept talking back and forth. They figured maybe he wasn't anyone's sibling. Maybe he was related by marriage or a second cousin twice removed that I just called Uncle Matt because that was the easiest thing to call him. We all have a relative like that, right? I know an easy solution you might be thinking of is to just call him up. That's also what I said, but he was working and they didn't want to interrupt him. But guess what? I needed answers, so I decided to call him. However, when I looked at my phone, I couldn't find him in my contacts. I looked through it multiple times. I remembered texting him about something a few days back, so he should have been in my text history. Still nothing. After being weirded out by his contact being gone, I mentioned out loud that someone should call him. Regardless of him being at work, no one agreed with me, but once I told them his contact was missing from my phone, they all got curious and looked to see if he was missing for them too. We were all in shock to find him missing from all our phones. The family started to dig through their camera rolls and any digital libraries they had to try and find any photo of him. Uncle Andrew thought he had a photo of the back of him, but we soon found that we all remembered him looking differently. Uncle Andrew showed a picture of the back of a bald man who looked pretty tall. Aunt June called him crazy and recalled him having long, curly red hair. It wasn't like we hadn't seen him in a year, or that he was some kind of distant memory. I saw the guy last week. He came over to my house to help me with some homework, and I can tell you he didn't have red hair or no hair at all. He was well shoot. I can't remember what he looked like now that I think about it. It was safe to say we were all creeped out. As the sun went down and it got chilly out, the group moved inside. Normally this is when everyone would go home, but I saw Aunt Margot start a pot of coffee. It was going to be a long night. The air was tense and full of unease. None of the adults wanted to go home until they had answers. I could tell the adults wanted to talk more, but didn't want to worry the younger cousins. My older cousin Maddie clearly didn't care about anything that was going on. She just wanted to sleep. We convinced her to take my 3 young cousins into the basement so they could all get some sleep. But not me. I was invested. Uncle Matt and I are close. We see each other all the time. How could I not have a shred of evidence that he even existed? As my cousins shuffled downstairs, all the adults huddled around a big whiteboard. Aunt Margot slapped on the kitchen island. They started to write down everything they could remember. What he looked like the last time they saw him, memories of him. None of it was coherent. It seemed he was a completely different person in all our memories, even if it was a memory where multiple people were around. One of the only things that we could all agree on was that the Jensens always thought he was on the Miller side of the family, and the Millers always thought he was on the Jensen side. My mom recalled a story of Matt and my dad going to a lake to fish, but the hook got stuck on Matt's hat and went flying. My dad told us he remembered my mom telling him the same exact story many times. Everyone had memories of stories where he was on the other side of the family. Soon everyone was on the phone with a new family member trying to tell them the situation and asking what they thought about everything. My aunts and uncles were talking to realities on the phone I didn't know I had, relatives that probably only met Matt a couple times at best. All I heard was one dead end at a time. No one knew where he came from or where he went. So the big question was, who is Matt? Was he just some random guy who weaseled his way into the family, telling one side of the family one thing and the other side another? Or was it something so much worse? As the sun came up that Saturday morning, we were all still scratching our heads. The deeper we got into who Matt was, the more freaked out everyone got. I was honestly surprised they let me stay with them all night long. The more digging everyone did, the farther away we felt. The more rabbit holes we went down, the less real he seemed. We couldn't find any evidence that he ever existed. Some of us searched all over the internet for Matt Jensen or Matt Miller. And a few of us searched for other last names in the family. Of course, it was kind of hard to know who we were looking for, given we didn't know what he really looked like. After hours of discussion, we compiled a list of attributes that never wavered about Uncle Matt. He was a man, he never had a mustache, he was tall, he was bad at math, and he loved Jim Carrey movies. That might seem like a random grouping of facts, but that's because it was. We couldn't even remember where his house was. Some of us completely forgot, and others remembered different houses. It didn't matter. We weren't going to start knocking on doors to find a man we were concerned never existed. We started to believe that as soon as we began to question who he was, he just simply started to fade away into nothingness, like it was some kind of self-destructive on his own consciousness. It was around 9 a.m. that morning when people started to fall asleep on couches. The night before started with everyone being determined and saying the night wouldn't end until we found Uncle Matt, but here we all were, exhausted and with little to no answers. It felt like accepting defeat by napping on the couch, but we couldn't do much else. At 11 a.m., we all woke up to the sound of my cousins playing in the next room over. We all sat up and rubbed our eyes. You could practically see the gears turning in everyone's heads as they woke up from their stupors. I could tell when they realized their memories actually happened, and it wasn't just a weird fever dream. My Aunt Margot stumbled to the kitchen while yawning and started to dig in the pantry for something substantial the kids could all eat. It was clear they had already raided the cookie stash. As the adults had a quiet conversation, we heard something come from my cousin Cass that made us freeze. "Yeah, remember last night when Uncle Matt gave us all those cookies? It was so much fun," my small cousin said with a hop and a skip. "Wait, Cass, get over here and say that again." My Uncle Andrew yelled in an attempt to sound intimidating, but came out with a voice crack. Cass walked over to us looking like a confused puppy who just got yelled at. What did I do wrong, Uncle Andrew? I thought if Uncle Matt offered us cookies, I could have them? Cass, you are not in trouble. This is very important. Are you telling me Uncle Matt was with you guys last night? Uncle Andrew tried to say in a gentle tone to not scare Cass. I mean, not the whole night, but he brought us all cookies and put a movie on for us. Then he said he wanted to go hang out with you guys upstairs. Cass told us with a quiet voice. Everyone started to frantically look around the room, looking for any evidence of him being there last night. We quickly asked the rest of the cousins if they saw Matt, and some kids did, and some didn't. I noticed something when I started to count the objects in the room. There were 10 adults and me upstairs last night, so there should have been 11 people in total. But I saw 12 plates out with the leftover crumbs from our late-night pizza, 12 spots laid out for sleeping in the living room, and 12 mugs or cups of coffee. He was here last night. As I mentioned what I found, my dad said he remembered seeing him last night. He said Matt brought him some water. Uncle Paul said he saw him go to the bathroom but couldn't remember him coming out. They mentioned how it felt like it never actually happened, but he managed to place the memory in them after the fact. How else would they see Uncle Matt right in front of them and not realize what was happening? I had a strange feeling that started to bubble up. I felt uneasy and restless. Wait, something is off here, I said loudly to the room. Everyone line up on the wall, I want to try something. For a second, they all looked at me confused. They normally wouldn't let me boss them around like that, but they were desperate and tired. All the adults lined up against the wall. As I walked by then, I counted out loud. Something strange happened. I counted 12 people, including me. None of the kids were lined up. I wasn't counting myself twice. There was an extra person. Uncle Matt wasn't just here last night. He was with us in the room at that moment. Other members of the family even tried to count. We did it over and over again, even adding one of the kids to the mix, but every single time there was one extra person, but we still couldn't see him. How was he hiding in plain sight? Everyone ended up leaving my Aunt Margot's house that afternoon. We were all still extremely creeped out about the whole thing, but what could we do about it? Not much. It's not like Uncle Matt ever did anything violent. Mostly normal behavior, except for a few memories of him that were kinda weird. One of us remembered seeing him in the kitchen stacking and unstacking bowls for hours. Another person remembered him once packing for a vacation, but his suitcase only had trash bags in it. And I have a memory of us sitting in front of a fireplace with him reading the instruction manual to a blender for a bedtime story. At least those were the kind of memories we had in the beginning. As the weeks went on, we started to remember things that got more and more concerning. He showed up in our houses in the middle of the night, or buying us all hammers for Christmas. He once bought hundreds of dollars worth of knives and put them in my dad's car. Once we developed disturbing memories of him, we tried to tell the police. Of course, they couldn't find any evidence of his existence, so they couldn't help us. It didn't help our case that we couldn't even give them a last name. How on earth are they supposed to find a guy based on his name being Matt and no physical features? So who is Uncle Matt? I can say with 100% certainty I have no clue. Is he a man? Is he an entity? Is he a figment of our imaginations? Or is he nothing at all? I don't know. And that's the worst part of all. He seems to always be around at family dinners. Most of the time I count the number of people I end up with an extra person. He feels like a virus, always implanting a memory of himself being around, but in the moment I never see him. It seems to be a family joke at this point, always leaving out an extra plate for him or something. In my opinion, no one is taking this situation seriously. I know he hasn't hurt anyone, but why should we wait for something to happen? I swear I can feel it when he shows up. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My family has given up on trying to figure out who or what Uncle Matt is, but I haven't. It feels like they have all just forgotten the disturbing memories of him. I swear the deeper I dig to find him, the worse the memories get. Like he is rotting and festering in my memories, right before my eyes. I'm starting to think it's his attempt to stop me from looking for him. The fact that he is punishing me for looking for him makes my concern grow more and more. Why is he suddenly running now that I am onto him? Why is he so afraid of me finding him? And what will happen once I do find him? I will find you, Uncle Matt. I will find out what you are. The first time I encountered this bizarre denial was after my first semester at college. I trekked to the Amtrak station, luggage in tow, and asked the attendant for one ticket, Casey Falls, Michigan, please. She looked up from her desk and blinked. Where? Casey Falls, Michigan. I repeated a smidge slower this time. After she performed a search on her computer, then sought counsel from her manager, they determined that if Casey Falls was a real place, it wasn't a stop on any of their lines. How can that be? I protested. I could see its train station as clearly in my mind's eye as their bewildered faces before me. Every spring break, I took the train with my family into Chicago, boarding at 7 o'clock in the morning at the platform just east of Berry Street. Dad would hand me $2 to buy a Coke and a bag of pretzels from the vending machines before the train arrived. My younger sister Janie and I sat impatiently on the benches waiting for our journey to begin, but relaying this memory to the exasperated attendants did little to correct their system, which omitted Casey Falls from its available destinations. I spent that Christmas alone in my dorm, desperately trying to get a hold of my family, but none of them answered. Mom, dad, sister, phone, email, text, Facebook, nothing. Even stranger was that overnight their online presence vanished. Erased socials, bounced emails. When I called again, a recording informed me that the numbers I was trying to reach had been disconnected. What is going on? The following 2 weeks, ordinarily spent opening presents, reconnecting with high school friends, ringing in the new year, were instead subsumed under my intense investigation. I scrubbed the internet for any mention of my hometown. I came up empty-handed. Despite endless hours scouring Google, Yahoo, even Bing, I found no mention of the central Michigan burg ensconced in forest home to Casey Falls Army Training Camp and the defunct collapsed copper mines. Even Google Maps erased Casey Falls from its records. Where ordinarily I would see the cluster of homes and farms in Main Street, there was only a green swath of forest land. My hometown had literally been wiped off the map. Worse yet, it was beginning to disappear from my own memory. As break rolled on, and my ceaseless search failed to yield a shred of evidence of my hometown's existence, I noticed my own recollection of it fading. While staring bleary-eyed at the television on New Year's Eve, watching revelers crowd Times Square to watch the spangled ball drop, I realized I couldn't remember any previous New Year's Eve. How had I spent them in Casey Falls? Maybe it was common to forget a few, for their memories to bleed into one another, to mix up which party went with which year, but to lose every New Year's Eve from one's personal history. I felt hollow, and in the void where Casey Falls and my preceding 18 years of memories should have been something dark and sinister, lurked. When my roommate returned in January and saw that I'd been holed up in our dorm for the entire break, he naturally inquired what happened. What happened indeed, was my mad response. Desperate for a memory of home, even if secondhand, I interrogated Sean. Surely you remember me talking about home at some point, right? I asked. And while he agreed that surely in our various 2 a.m. chats we must have touched on the subject, he was chagrined to admit nothing specific returned. The silver lining to this distressing chat was that I now had a partner. Sean, fascinated by my absent origin, took up the cause with me. He caught up quick, performing his own research online before arriving at the conclusion that we had to see for ourselves. So on a weekend in late January, he drove us in his junky sedan into the heart of the Mitten, to where Casey Falls should have carved out a space for itself from the surrounding forest. To my horror, we found only trees. Where Main should have intersected with Blanchard, there was only a dirt drive reaching back into the woods. Sean didn't think his car would handle the uneven road too well, but after some pleading, he acquiesced. We drove slow along the forested road, tree branches squeezing us into a tunnel of foliage. Right here, I said. Casey Falls should be right here. I leapt out of the car and raced through the woods. I'm not sure why. I don't think it was rational, just my emotions taking control. A medley comprising anger, grief, confusion, fear that propelled me through the underbrush until I tripped over something metal. I turned back to find a green box, like a geocache, resting on the forest floor. Inside, pages yellowed with age featured some sort of code scrawled across them, written with only half-decent penmanship. "What the hell is that?" asked Sean when he finally caught up to me. It was the question we tried pairing with an answer over the ensuing month. Neither of us were real code breakers, so we shopped the pages around campus, taking it to math nerds and professors in the hopes one of them might crack it. One by one, they tried their best to decipher the documents, but each one met invariably with defeat. One professor called it the toughest code she'd ever encountered, while another suggested in all likelihood the pages were rubbish. But the fact that I'd found it where my hometown should have been kept me from accepting the latter explanation. Something was written in those pages, something that helped explain what happened to Casey Falls. But I'll never uncover its secrets. Because on March 3rd, someone tore our dorm room apart, and the only thing they took with them was the coded pages. Spooked by this flagrant invasion of privacy, Sean told me he would pursue the Casey Falls mystery no further. He believed that by showing the documents around campus, we'd attracted the attention of the feds. CIA, NSA, some other three-letter agency no one had ever heard of, and now we were being watched. "Whatever happened to your hometown?" Sean said. "They don't want anyone to find out." The next week, Sean transferred out, enrolling in a school on the East Coast. He left without saying goodbye, another exit without ceremony. I've since taken a barista job to be able to stay in Chicago through the summer since I've got nowhere else to go. While reckoning with the fact I've become an orphan in every sense of the word, I can't help shaking the feeling that someone is watching me. Whatever happened to Casey Falls, it wasn't good. I can feel it in my bones, the unheard screams of family and neighbors vibrating in the marrow. I feel them, and it makes me sick, but I cling to the horror because it's all I have left of home.